was born in Chicago at the age of 31. Over the years, people have asked us how we made the decision to leave the Soviet Union and the hurdles that we had to overcome. The simple answer, we realized many years later, is that it was not one single event, but rather all the tiny little events of day-to-day life that cumulatively brought us to the point where emigration was our life jacket. It was an agonizing decision to make and an agonizing process to go through. We knew that at any moment, no matter how far along we were, it could all fall apart for us. As refuseniks then, we would have no jobs, fewer friends, and even more fear. Only the distance of so much time helped me understand how the realities that I encountered as a child, teen, wife, and mother motivated the decision to grab our children and run.
A Jew walks into the Soviet Union Department of Visas. Why do you apply to immigrate? 2 reasons. The first, my neighbor promised to kill me when the Soviet regime was over. The Soviet regime will never be over. That's the second reason. Bena was born in Kiev. Bena's mother, Raquel, had an easy pregnancy and a quick delivery. No matter if the baby was a boy or a girl, the name was carved in stone. Bena, after Raquel's father. Since circumcision was outlawed...
My parents are happy I am a girl.
Bena was an only child, but she was hardly alone. In the first year of her life, she lived with her parents, Avram and Raquel, her babushka, Polina, Avram's 4 sisters, their families, in 3 connecting rooms.
750 square feet.
The building was under the jurisdiction of the MVD, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, a KGB-like organization where Avram worked as head of bookkeeping. At that time, family thanked fate for having 60 square feet to live in. So, 2 large rooms with only 3 other families showed volumes of Avram's position. But when Bena started showing signs of TB, the doctors recommended they move to a safer environment. Move! That was laughable. As if they didn't already know that nobody had anywhere to go.
Daddy thinks that his boss will not give us a room, but his boss is a colonel that has personally met Lenin.
A brothel is opening up in Moscow and seeking reliably communist women to work there. The requirement for being hired? Anyone who had met Lenin. The colonel admired Avram's position and had even invited him and Raquel over to his 7-room private apartment. But still, a Jew, and one who had chosen not to join the Communist Party, Avram had better remember his place. So he was reluctant to ask for a new room. But Raquel sprang into action early one morning. She darted past the guard stationed in front of the colonel's building, flying up the stairs past his wife. She found him still in bed. She talked fast. And by the end of the day, the colonel assigned Avram a new room.
140 square feet.
In another building under the jurisdiction of the MVD. They shared this communal apartment with only one other family, a lieutenant colonel, his wife who worked as a typist at the MVD, doubled as an informant, and
Lucia is 2 years older than me.
their daughter. They were ordered to relinquish one of their 4 rooms to Bena's family.
We share a kitchen, a foyer, and a washroom with a sink and a tub. But the lieutenant colonel won't let us go into the washroom because he's mad at us for taking away his extra room.
A unique Soviet phenomenon. Communal apartments housed as many families as there were rooms. Rarely did a family have more than one room which functioned as
Living room, bedroom, office, nursery.
and hospice. In some bathrooms, nails held stacks of newspaper squares that belonged to the family whose name was scratched above the nail. When toilet tissue finally appeared on the scene, the lucky owner of the roll brought it with him, or brought the requisite amount of squares.
Don't let them know you have real toilet paper.
No wonder the Russian language didn't have a word for privacy. Neighbors knew everything about each other, whether by eavesdropping, gossiping, observation, or opening each other's mail.
Lucia's mommy always listens at the door outside of our room. Sometimes when we open the door, it hits her and we apologize. And Lucia's, and mommy and daddy and babushka always talk in a language that I don't understand, so that Lucia's mommy and I won't know what they're talking about.
It was Yiddish.
And they have funny nicknames for the people they are talking about. And they keep staring at me and making the mouth-locking signal. And when they speak in Russian, they don't want to tell me what the words that I don't already know mean. And when they do explain, they tell me not to ask questions. Arrest means going away forever. Exile means the place where one goes away forever. Statute means the reason for going away forever. Execution means not breathing again forever. I am playing house with Lucia in her room. I don't really like to play house, but if I do, Lucia will let me look at Crocodile, a funny magazine her family has. Lucia's daddy comes over to me and points to a picture in the magazine of a man with a mustache and a uniform, and another man with a double chin, a pipe in his mouth, and a stomach hanging down to his knees.
Which man do you like more?
The funny fat man.
Bena was not yet 3 years old and already preferred Churchill over Stalin! Yes. The following day at work, the personnel department had a question for Avram. Is this what you teach your child? Meaning choosing Churchill over Stalin. Avram acknowledged his shortcomings in raising his daughter and vowed to correct his mistakes.
I am never to go into Lucia's room and never to talk to her again. If I do, Mommy says Daddy will be arrested.
The reaction to Avram's shortcomings was swift. An order came down to fire him for cosmopolitanism. The rootless campaign against cosmopolitans was one of Stalin's last murderous campaigns. It centered mostly on Jews, stateless vagrants of the world not capable of loyalty or patriotism to a single country.
But the colonel did not fire Daddy. He could protect Daddy and was not afraid to do so because he had personally met Lenin.
Oh, Avram expected to be fired, but one did not have the choice to resign.
One could only resign if you were arrested or executed.
Bena's about to turn 4.
I am playing very quietly, like my parents told me to, with my ball in the foyer of the apartment. The door to Lucia's dining room is open. I roll the ball too hard, and it rolls all the way in. They are eating. Lucia has red bows in her braids. Lucia's mommy waves at me to come and get the ball. I run to the door and stop. I can't lift my feet. If I go in, Daddy will be arrested and go away forever. I can't breathe. Lucia's mommy walks over to the ball and throws it back to me. I'm scared and I shriek. I'm dizzy as I pick up the ball. Mommy picks me up and holds me tightly. I start breathing again.
These are Bena's first clear memories. Bena's 5.5. The older she got, the more she preferred the indoors. The outdoors was no fun. Living reminders of the Great Patriotic War, as the Soviets called World War II, filled the streets. Crutches, wooden shafts instead of shoes, pants legs pinned above the knee, legless men swished around on wheeled pallets, pushing themselves with gloved fists. They were tarnishing the landscape of a great victorious nation. The very sight of their stumps had a demoralizing effect. One night, the militia rounded up all of the homeless veterans, loaded them into cattle cars, and sent them to camps known as graveyards for war veterans. It is suggested that Kiev contributed over 1,000 victims that night.
I get spanked for being happy they have vanished.
The colonel could no longer protect Avram's job, personal acquaintanceship with Lenin notwithstanding. His clout ran its course. He had to fire Avram. They had 72 hours to vacate their apartment. Non-MVD employees could not reside in that building.
I don't care. Daddy is only fired, not arrested. Babushka and I stay with Mommy's friend in her 80-square-foot room. Mommy stays with another friend. And Daddy sleeps on a desk under the stairs in his old office building.
The young soldier on duty, grateful for a past favor, lets Avram in a few hours every night. If found out, they both would have been executed. After 9 months, Avram finally secured a job. The head of a manufacturing plant puts his reputation and his freedom online to petition his superiors in the hiring of a cosmopolitan who had been fired from the MVD. Shaken by Avram's story, he even assigns the family apartment before his superiors approve his request. The plant and the apartment were located on the outskirts of Kiev, near Kirinevka, a largely rural area near Babi Yar.
I am happy. We are together again.
A man of Stalin's age walks around the Red Square carrying a poster that says, "Thank you, Comrade Stalin, for a happy childhood." Someone stops him and says, "When you were a child, Stalin was not our leader." He replies, "That's why I'm thanking him." Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union for almost 30 years. His campaigns against spies and enemies of the people destroyed farmers and much of the Soviet brainpower. Entire ethnicities were deported to remote areas. Those passed over by his genocidal meat grinder lived in constant fear long after he was gone. Most Soviet families, among them those persecuted, worshiped Stalin, saw a godlike figure in him, incapable of flawed judgment. They referred to him as the father of all nations. Bena is in first grade when Joseph Stalin dies.
Mommy rushes into the house after work and, still in her wet galoshes, starts skipping around the table, clapping and chanting.
Detacte Eskistorben! Detacte Eskistorben! Detacte Eskistorben! Dad has died! Dad has died!
Babushka looks to the ceiling and thanks God.
Gott!
Babushka... Babushka splurges. 5 eggs are nothing to sneeze at on a small sponge cake. But the radio is playing sad music. At school, my classmates sob and wipe their noses with their sleeves. And everybody wears a black band on their left arm except for me. I'm happy because of the special sponge cake. The teacher asks me,
Don't you know Comrade Stalin has died?
I know somebody's daddy is dead. Whose daddy is it? When I get home from school, I tell Mommy and Babushka that I have to wear a black armband to school for the next 3 days. But Mommy says that the stores don't have any black fabric. And Babushka says that she has no scraps of black fabric.
Bena always wondered if Babushka, an accomplished seamstress, really did have some black fabric.
I have to go to school without an armband. And we are not allowed to smile for 3 days, but I forget that and smile. A tattletale boy runs to our teacher.
Bena is smiling! Nikita Khrushchev becomes the next leader of the Soviet Union. 3 years later, he renounces the horrors of Stalin era and exonerates Stalin's victims. For a short time, he relaxes the political and cultural climate. And in an unintended consequence, this policy triggers the dissident movement.
They are taking down the portraits of Stalin in the foyer at school. And our principal announces that we now live in a free country.
Still though, in history class one day, Bena's teacher says, Peter's appropriation of Swedish land was justified because Russia needed a window to Europe.
But that was not Russian land.
But Russia needed a window to Europe.
But that was not Russian land. The teacher orders me to sit down and later calls Dad at work to tell him that my big mouth will put the family in danger. When I get home from school, everyone pounces on me, terrified.
One must understand and one must keep mum.
Babushka then makes the mouth-locking signal and goes to the headrest of the sofa and pulls out 3 books. Their pages are yellow, their binders frayed. She hands the books to Dad.
Ah, Shalom Aleichem.
Dad is turning the pages strangely from left to right. The alphabet looks strange too. It must be Yiddish. Please, teach me how to read Yiddish.
That is not safe. But if you promise not to tell anyone, I will read the stories out loud to you. Avram read and reread the stories every evening for 2 years. Well, having retired and, well, not as scared about losing his job as before, Avram started ordering matzah for Passover. This was an elaborate process whose first step was establishing the correct date of the holiday.
Dad doesn't want to go into the synagogue because it could get us in trouble. So he wanders around near the synagogue looking for older Jewish-looking men.
He whispers to each one in Yiddish, "When is Passover? And when will the synagogue start accepting orders for matzah?" Most pretend not to hear him or understand, but eventually one will reply, quietly.
He then has to go around to the back of the synagogue to place the order and pay for it.
The next step is actually picking up the order.
Please, let me go with you.
That is too dangerous. Promise me you will not go near the synagogue. If you do, you will be photographed. You can be thrown out of school. You can lose whatever job you secure.
I don't even know where the synagogue is.
On pickup day, Avram leaves the house at dawn, carrying 2 suitcases with pillowcases in each. He takes a roundabout way to the synagogue and an even wider roundabout way home, with the matzahs hidden inside the pillowcases. Next year in Jerusalem, indeed. It was all but outlawed to teach Hebrew in the Soviet Union. If revealing one's Jewish background was dangerous. Ironically, covering up one's Jewish traditions was also a serious offense. It showed that one did not believe in
the friendship of all peoples, a pillar of communism.
Sometime after we arrived in Chicago, the caseworker at Jewish Family Services arranged for us to have a full-fledged Passover Seder at a volunteer's house. To say that we felt out of place there was an understatement. We clustered around the grandmother who spoke Yiddish and were flattered that she flew all the way from Florida to meet us. The harmony did not last, however. The grandmother went on about how her illiterate parents had reached America's shores with nothing but the clothes on their backs, whereas we, professionals, doctors and engineers even, were fleecing American Jewry. We had to laugh. Nobody was lower on the Soviet social ladder or pay scale than doctors and engineers. Americans assumed that professionals had to be valued. We did not yet comprehend that professionals could be valued. The Seder dragged on forever. My daughters, Emily and Paulina, kept asking for food, thankfully in Russian. They were asked to find the afikomen, and we had no idea what that was. The lady of the house was insulted by our ignorance.
Khrushchev comes back from the U.S. all fired up about catching up with America and surpassing them in every possible category, from milk to bombs. He calls on his assistant. America has over 1,000 synagogues. We only have 20. Catch up and surpass. You have a month. A month later, the assistant reports, no problem with the synagogues. We have over 1,000 now. The issue is finding rabbis. Those that apply are not members of the Communist Party. Some are even Jewish. In 1961, Bena turned 16.
I get my passport. The fifth line on it states my nationality, Jewish. Of course, both of my parents are Jewish.
With dozens of nationalities in the Soviet Union, the fifth line applied exclusively to Jews.
A yellow star worn on identification instead of on clothes.
Also that year, the party earmarked 1980 as the year when the transition from mere socialism to pure communism would be complete. Why are we hungry if we are on the way to pure communism?
Because eating on the road will slow us down. We'll eat when we get there. Food is always deficit. Everything is deficit.
Deficit, in short supply or unavailable. Queues form in moments, fueled by rumors that some item would be available. A man comes home and catches his wife with a lover. Are you crazy? What are you doing home? When there's a line for oranges at the store next door. Shortages happened at random to random products for random durations.
Sugar, eggs, buckwheat, mayonnaise, shoes, buttons.
Some shortages lasted for a short time, some shortages lasted for years. Someone says the Soviet industry always does not produce something. But shortages aside, the real obstacle in converting to pure communism was the West. The malicious influence of Western culture and music had to be contained. Teens were craving the depraved boogie-woogie, the Charleston, jazz, rock and roll. And everyone craved the superior imported clothes.
Soviet stuff is pitiful.
Nothing could reduce the allure of foreign-made goods. And the vision of the glamorous, forbidden world behind them was titillating. Especially the vision of imported lingerie. Pantyhose from Czechoslovakia across the border in the late 1960s, but for a long time they were deficit. And bras made in the Soviet Union only came in 3 sizes.
I can only find imported bras for sale in the public bathroom on the main street, Kreshchatik. Frumpy women clutching roomy purses are selling them. I have to wait for one of them to whisper to me,
Czech underwear? German bra? A pair of underwear went for a day's wages. Not surprisingly, it passed through many channels, starting with a ballerina or a sailor traveling abroad before ending up in Kiev's public bathrooms. It got so bad that the Minister of Culture, a female, stated in her speech at a top-level party meeting, "Every Soviet woman has the right to wear a quality bra." Blocked or inside connections were the backbone of Soviet economy and Soviet day-to-day life. One did not buy things. One obtained things through money or a stick of salami, alcohol, perfume, anything anyone had access to. Some of Bena's classmates were meeting regularly at her apartment to study for university entrance exams and enjoy babushka's non-alcoholic cherry cordial, the Soviet Manischewitz.
These exams are stringent, and there are always more applicants than there are available spots. How many Jews will they really accept anyway?
Her classmates accuse her of fishing for compliments and bat away any suggestion that their country sanctions discrimination in any way. But for Bena, anti-Semitism is the ever-present elephant in the room.
My heart is set on the 6-year evening program in Russian language at the Kiev University.
A university known not only for its quality education, but also for its rabid Ukrainian nationalism and anti-Semitism.
But to apply to the evening program, I have to furnish employment verification and later demonstrate that I have the prospects for getting a job in my intended field of study, or I will be dismissed from the university. But a month before the entrance exams, the engineering department at my father's plant hires me to trace drawings.
Bena was not anxious about the exams.
I expect to fail. I've known since childhood the deck is stacked against me.
But the first 3 go smoothly. And then comes the one in Russian literature. The professor pounces. Do you agree with Yevtushenko's Babi Yar that anti-Semitism has a place in the Soviet Union? Should that poem have seen the light of day? Would you recite works from other contemporary poets? Do you agree with Ehrenberg's anti-Stalin novel, The Thaw?
I speak, quote, and recite for almost an hour, fueled by adrenaline and defiance and the recognition that I have nothing to lose. Apparently, I avoid the undertow. And the interrogator states that even though I deserve a 3, she'll generously give me a 4. I get in! But since I am majoring in humanities, tracing drawings will likely remain my lot in perpetuity. The 5th line on my passport won't let me get a job in my intended field of study.
The virtual sign Jews need not apply protected ideological front institutions like the media, kindergartens, libraries, schools, and scientific firms from the Zionists.
The leading enemy of progressive mankind.
It was a given that the future did not look bright for the intelligentsia, meaning professionals, especially Jewish intelligentsia. A teacher comforts a boy whose father is a doctor. That's okay, bad things happen.
During my first summer break, I spend a few days at a friend's house in Moscow. She tells me to begin with the pilgrimage to Lenin's mausoleum. I go. But the queue that snakes around the Red Square promises hours in the hot sun. What a waste of time.
When Bena returns to work,
I foolishly admit to my Komsomol, young Communist League leader, that I skipped the mausoleum. He threatens to convene an emergency meeting to assess my political leanings. I am petrified. But, as luck would have it, that night the janitor catches him in the attic with a woman who is not his wife. Whew, he now had worries other than my mausoleum transgression.
Khrushchev suddenly relinquishes his throne, supposedly because of ill health. Leonid Brezhnev sets out to reverse the remnants of Khrushchev's liberal reforms.
I am so busy that I hardly register our move to a new apartment. We now live at a sought-after address.
14 of Friendship of People's Boulevard. Rakil's networking skills get Bena a job as a proofreader in an engineering firm that designed installations for boilers and burners. This job saves Bena from dismissal from the university.
And soon I am transferred to the newly established information department and am promoted from proofreader to translator.
Bena had a flair for languages and was familiar with several. In her new job, she translated technical periodicals from European languages to Russian, compiled lists of recommended sources, and wrote brochures for seminars. The prerequisite to Bena's degree thesis defense was a course in scientific communism, the finishing touch to an ideological series of courses on the history of the Communist Party, political economy, scientific atheism, and Marxist-Leninist philosophy divided into dialectical materialism and historical materialism. But
do you know how the class on dialectical materialism started? Let me clarify the difference between materialism and dialectical materialism. A chicken is materialism. A given chicken is dialectical materialism.
But scientific communism focused primarily on the continual and eventual final stages of decay of capitalism, vis-a-vis the blossoming of socialism.
At least this professor gets in some taboo comments. He knows we'll catch on to his hidden meaning and opinions in spite of his poker face.
Yes, capitalism is decaying. It won't happen tomorrow, but it is decaying. Decaying! Decaying! But the
smell is rather splendid.
The 50th anniversary year of the Bolshevik Revolution. At home, Bena's family shared a phone line with a neighbor and the intercom of a nearby hotel. The lines get crossed fairly regularly. One such errand call brings a man into Bena's life.
A crossed connection repeatedly sends Dima to our phone line instead of to his boss's line.
His formal name is Mikhail, but he goes by Dima.
This stranger keeps me on the phone no matter how hard I try to end the conversation. It doesn't work even when I play the ace that has stopped many an unwanted suitor. I'm tall.
Good. So am I.
He is so sweet. Babushka always tells me that when I meet a man that loves me, like her father loved her mother, and like Dedushka Bena loved her, and like my father loves my mother, I will know. After hanging up the phone this Sunday evening, do I know?
Dima knew. He insisted he knew the moment he heard Bena's voice.
He wheedles the apartment number out of me, as well as a day and time to come over. It's highly unlikely he intends to show up. He is tall and balding, with a gray felt hat in one hand and a small bunch of wildflowers in the other. His gray eyes laugh as if holding in a joke. 4 hours fly by. We spend our first date braving the March drizzle and slush. We try to get a table at a new cafe that's as funky, as they say, as the cafes abroad. It even has some tables for two, but we must wait in a long queue. As we approach my building at the end of the evening, Dima says to me, "Oh, he looks so solemn."
When I left your house the evening we met, I was too excited to take the trolley. Walking home, I wondered if I'd be able to give you the life you deserve.
Is this his way of asking me to marry him?
Soviet society compelled women to marry early. A girl proved her respectability with modest clothes and manners by not progressing beyond kisses and by never admitting the need to pee, no matter how long the date. Revolutionary doctrine taught that sexuality, though an undeniable appetite, was utilized by capitalists to control the working people. The book, 12 Sexual Commandments of the Revolutionary Proletariat, stated that sexual intercourse should not repeat often. The word sex was never uttered.
Dima and I submit our marriage proposal at the all-the-rage Kiev Wedding Palace instead of the dreary Office of Vital Statistics.
Marriage presented a once-in-a-lifetime access to the special wedding store, full of deficits sold at government prices without waiting in line. The place was clean, the staff polite, the goods neatly stacked. No wonder people joked that it tempted people to jump over the counter and ask for political asylum.
Our wedding party proceeds up a long staircase and into a large hallway. A woman in a white above-the-knee dress and an over-the-shoulder satin sash admonishes us to keep our union, the building block of Soviet society, strong and unshakable. We and our witnesses sign the register, and we exchange rings. Then, in the name of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, she pronounces us husband and wife. We are all celebrating back at the apartment when, all of a sudden, my normally low-key father starts quietly singing the Yiddish wedding tune.
Things really shook up the USSR 50 years after the revolution. Stalin's daughter, Svetlana Alioeva, defected to the West and asked for political asylum in the United States. She besmirched his memory in her tell-all book.
And Israel defeats the invading Arab armies in the Six-Day War. The USSR threw a tantrum and severed all diplomatic relations with Israel.
Radio airwaves were saturated with anti-Semitism. Almost overnight, Israel went from a weakling to a Zionist warmonger.
And Soviet Jews from trapped pushovers to people with a home.
People stopped talking to their Jewish colleagues and neighbors. The phrase, "This is not your motherland, go to your Israel," accompanied bus rides and food lines.
Dima and I feel strong and proud, an unfamiliar and quite addictive feeling. There is no turning back. It matters not that we have to hide our pride or that we remain trapped.
Their first child, a daughter, is born. When Bena's contractions begin, Dima flagged down a private car to take her to the hospital because there was no time to wait for an ambulance.
twisting with pain. I change into a hospital gown and start filling out a lengthy questionnaire. I can't wait, though.
Ugh. First-timers have no patience. Go find a delivery room.
I trudge down the agonizingly long hallways.
After the baby is born, the post-delivery room was full, so they put Bena in the pre-delivery room where there was a vacant bed. The room was full of squealing, screaming, moaning creatures writhing on twin beds, because Soviet medicine did not believe in easing labor pains with medication. For the standard 7-day stay, Bena was transferred to a room with 2 rows of beds, 4 beds in each row.
The infants, swaddled mummy-like in flannel, arrive on rolling pallets every 3 hours, from 6 in the morning until midnight. I will not see my daughter unswaddled until we bring her home.
3 times a day, the orderlies place plates of cold food on the nightstand. Apparently, the cockroaches had been sterilized. Flowers and visitors were not permitted for fear of germs. Bena had to talk to Dima through the top pane of a window.
Traditionally, the mother chooses the name for the firstborn. I have no close relatives who are deceased. So we agree on Mila, after Dima's father, Moise. The full name is Amelia.
The week Mila is born, Dima received a promotion to the head of the construction department of his company. The promotion came with a string attached.
Obligatory Communist Party membership.
Dima had hoped to dodge this string, but had ran out of tricks.
Membership in my family and in the party is mutually exclusive. Astonished by my stone-cold resolve, Dima sacrifices the job. He finds another job as a low-paying engineer and is quickly promoted. The job pays much less, but I am happy, and to my relief, so is he.
In August, Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia for introducing liberal reforms known as the Prague Spring. The government justified this invasion by aiding a comrade in need.
From Voice of America, we learn that several Muscovites are protesting the invasion in Red Square, and that they are arrested or sent to psychiatric wards. They are daring to speak out. Precious few do. We feel beholden to them and are ashamed of our cowardice. Back in 1967, the unthinkable happens. Following Israel's victory in the Six-Day War, we Soviet Jews discover that Israel and others in the world want us. In the dead of night, half-jammed Voice of America reports prove that the world is fighting for us and is even prepared to ransom us. If the Soviet Union wanted American grain, and did it want bushels and bushels of American grain, then it must allow Soviet Jews to emigrate. In private, we taunt our government. Look who is trapped now. You don't think I'm worth much? Think again. My worth is measured in bushels.
On a business trip to Moscow, Dima ran into a former classmate who had applied to immigrate. According to him, the party had a directive on the books to allow up to 1,500 Jews to immigrate each year.
The gnawing thought of emigration hunkers down in the back of our minds. My parents are drinking in reports from BBC and Voice of America like water in the desert. And they are visiting with other families who are emigrating to wish them luck and to gather information that we might use should we decide to get out. The few Soviet Jews leaving the country kindles an unquenchable craving in us. Not that we can verbalize what that craving is for.
A new joke makes the rounds. A Jew approaches two Jews on the street and says, "Whatever you're talking about, we have to get out."
Missives from emigrants to their families in the Soviet Union are our favorite genre of literature. We don't actually know anyone personally who has emigrated, but the grapevine spreads information from them through quiet conversations. We are picking up important things to know about the journey out. We are growing more and more anxious. As the saying goes, cowards leave, risk takers stay. And we are definitely cowards.
To apply to immigrate is only for the sole purpose of family reunification. So one needed an invitation from an Israeli-born relative. Real or imaginary? Usually imaginary. It didn't matter as long as there was an invitation. Furthermore, to be allowed to immigrate, a family only needed one member to be Jewish. Hence the joke. A Jewish spouse is not a luxury,
but a means of transportation.
Those that applied for immigration were subject to immediate and voluntary loss of job, stripping of war medals, and boorishness and contempt at the Department of Registration and Visas, known as the OVIR, or OVIR, and at every place that issued the needed documents, spravki, written confirmation of facts. So, Jewish families started giving their names and addresses to those that were immigrating. Then the Israeli government would make sure that invitations from long-lost cousins were issued.
Mom sets out to find willing and dependable messengers to trust with our names. But she wants us to remain in the shadows. We cross our fingers.
The party adopts a new law. Put simply, if you leave, repay us for the education we gave you. Dubbed the diploma tax, the amount depended on degrees held and schools attended.
10,000 rubles for each of us. 20,000 rubles is as unattainable as $1 million. We backpedal on the requests to put in our names. We are trapped. Babushka passes away. We gain some hope from the jammed radio stations, which keep us abreast of America's response to the diploma tax. The greatest nation in the world rolls into action on our behalf.
The Soviet Union buckled under the threat of losing trade benefits and losing American wheat from America. The diploma tax is revoked. But one day, when Bena is picking Mila up from daycare, she noted traces of tears. Apparently, Mila's classmate had taken her doll and said, "I did not take Mila's doll." The teacher calmed Mila down by saying, "Lenin sat in the sky, watched everything we did, and would mete out a just punishment to the other girl." Mila was quite enthusiastic about Lenin taking care of her from the sky.
I can't tell Mila that Lenin is not all-powerful in the sky. She will tell her teacher and we'll all face the consequences. I have no choice but to become the teacher's accomplice. Ugh.
Dima's reaction was instant. We are getting out.
We resume passing out our names. And we have to start preparing, because when an invitation from Israel does arrive, the authorities could search our house in spite of our insignificance. So we give away our subversive materials, and an issue of Playboy, some pornographic photographs, and a ballpoint pen with a picture of a naked woman on it that Dima had bought from tourists. Our second child is born in November. We name her after Babushka Paulina. She will be toilet trained in a year, which means that we can shoot for early 1976 as our departure date.
Oh, in 12 months, most Soviet children were toilet trained. A big help in a community of cloth diapers and communal apartments.
Dima's mother is to come with us. My parents will follow later after we get out. If we are denied permission as refuseniks, we will be outlaws. But my parents will still be legitimate citizens who could help us. My mother says,
Do not feel guilty. Get the children out. The rest is irrelevant. The domestic winds blew in their favor. No sage or scholar or virulent anti-Semite, Brezhnev was a godsend. Bushy-browed, draped in over 100 decorations. He had shown signs of having suffered a stroke.
we pray for his well-being. Spider sense tells us that his successor will not be as benign.
Western radio intimated that in exchange for a most favored nation trade status with America and for American wheat, there would be an increase in Jewish immigration, and perhaps to places other than Israel. Although, to keep up the guise of family reunification, invitations would still have to come from Israel, and immigration would still officially only be permitted to Israel.
Dima says that he could not endure living in Israel without being able to serve in the army. Who, except the doctors, would believe that such a healthy-looking man had heart problems?
They didn't know then that he was already too old for the army.
Dima convinces us to go to the United States.
7 invitations from Israel arrive.
Step 1. We have to submit our job resignations and get a character reference. We warn friends not to call us. We'll call them from a public phone. We keep an eye on the political tides, which have the power to smooth out, speed up, toughen, or terminate our plans. We monitor the grapevine bulletins, make new contacts among the emigrant cohort, go to the station to see them off, and devour letters from them. These letters are the Pony Express of directives on what to do and in what order, what to bring with us, what bribes work on customs officers and border patrol, what to say and what not to say, how to behave during customs at the Ukrainian border, and all about the train rides through Czechoslovakia on the way to Vienna.
Austrian Chancellor Bruno Kreisky, who happened to be Jewish, allowed Austria to be a layover stop for Soviet Jews immigrating to Israel. Meanwhile, Soviet citizens were blindsided by shortages of bread, sugar, other food staples. The queues for food convulsed with hatred of Jews, since they were obviously blamed for the shortages of food, since they were, of course, buying up all of it to take to Israel. Milk disappeared before 8 in the morning.
The sword of Damocles hits below the belt when it targets yellow onions in stores. There isn't much one can cook without onions. The prices in the farmers' markets jump astronomically.
Those that reek of onions live beyond their means.
Dima is disappointed by the scarcity of his favorite onion-on-bread meal. Once, when I see him eating it, I cry hysterically. And from that day on, I hid onions from him.
Dima's favorite joke in America. Just a warning, Bena! I'm cutting myself a piece of onion. Don't get upset! Finally.
Paulina is toilet trained. And my father and Dima have finished compiling the paperwork needed to submit with our application.
These were the documents that proved they didn't owe money anywhere or didn't have any books checked out of the library. Avram and Raquel submit the very first piece of paper in the formal application process, their consent for Bena to immigrate. Parents needed to allow their children to immigrate, no matter if they were married, grown up, or even retired. Avram and Raquel made a big production of it. They underlined the word consent twice with large signatures. This was their opportunity to tell their government loud and clear exactly what they thought of it, and they were not going to miss the opportunity.
A more common response from parents: over my dead body. Consent to emigrate not given.
At the end of December, it was down to the last charade. Providing proof of family lineage with the relative who had sent the invitation from Israel. People called this a legend because it's not like any of it was true.
I invent a great-great-grandfather who came to Palestine after his divorce. His great-great-grandson is eager to reunite with me. I detail my Israeli family's history, including dates of births and marriages, in a notebook. According to the grapevine, the attorney that's appointed to review and approve these legends free of charge expects 10 rubles per person, 15 if she wrote the legend herself. I place the money into her top right desk drawer that she leaves ajar. The typist expects a bottle of perfume or a box of chocolates.
Now we are ready.
Bena, fortified by Valium, submitted their and his mother's application to the OVIR. The privilege of renouncing Soviet citizenship cost 800 rubles per passport holder.
1,600 rubles for our family, plus 800 for my mother-in-law. My monthly salary is 100 rubles. We borrow 300 rubles from each of 3 friends and vow to pay off the loans with American clothes. According to the grapevine, we should expect a summons from Ovir in about 3 months to learn if our application was approved. We will then have 3 weeks to wrap up what we already refer to as our former lives. We do not think about what will happen if we become refuseniks.
There were no official lists, but somehow everyone knew what was allowed or forbidden out of the country. For example, address books could not have any domestic addresses in them, leaving most of them empty.
And x-rays are forbidden. How will I communicate with foreign physicians about the girl's medical issues?
The doctors snuck the x-rays out of the hospital for them. The summons from Ovir arrived.
After 2 sleepless nights, Bena and I, holding trembling hands, joined the group of 24 others in the waiting room. Encouraged by the relieved faces of the families ahead of us, we enter the room behind a polished door. A man with a buzz cut recites,
The Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics has charitably agreed to allow your unification with the kin in the State of Israel. Exit visas to be issued March 26th through April 14th, provided all fees are paid and photographs furnished.
We thank him, and with our heads lowered, we back out of the waiting room.
Now that they had their exit visas authorizing exit from the Soviet Union, they needed their entry visas. Mila had a fever attack this week. But they were charitably allowed to extend their exit visas from April 14th to April 22nd.
The reality of our departure is closing in painfully on our dearest friends, and many of whom, incredibly, have clung to the fantasy that we had just been talking the talk. My lifelong girlfriend makes the sign of the cross over me.
Of course you should leave. If I were Jewish, I would leave this accursed country. The next step, now that they had their exit visas, Bena and Bena needed to get their entry visas into Israel. The only place allowed to represent Israel in the Soviet Union was the Dutch embassy in Moscow.
Bena and I arrived by train to Moscow early in the morning. At the Dutch embassy, a woman behind a window takes our exit visas and tells us to return at 3 p.m. to pick up our entry visas. We also bring with us 27 pages with the names and addresses of other families seeking an invitation from their Israeli relatives. The Dutch embassy will undiplomatically pass on those requests to the Israelis. Relieved for the time being, we sprint to the famously well-supplied Moscow department stores, where at one of them, mounted militia control the mob of delirious women screaming out sizes of German bras. And we return to the embassy, pick up our visas, and board the train for the ride back to Kiev.
Packing time for items to be shipped.
Books. A bookcase wall unit, kitchen stuff, pillows, blankets, 2 mounted wall rugs. And I know how helpful odds and ends can be. Threads, buttons, and zippers to replace broken ones. In America, every unspent penny will help. It takes a KGB captain many hours to examine our 3,500 books, one by one. He shakes each book, checks the year of publication, and ascertains that it does not belong to a library. The photograph inspection goes faster. We have none showing bridges or people in military uniforms.
The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society highest picked up the cost of shipping up to a metric ton of household goods, 1,000 kilos.
Our stuff weighs in at 920 kilos. The official fee for the delivery of our package to the docks and for its shipment comes to 30 rubles. Our movers ask for 300 rubles under the table, and, of course, a meal to take care of our, in their words, pathetic belongings.
Bena never forgave the 3 wardrobe-shaped men for devouring all their food, which was intended to last for a week. As allowed by the government, they exchanged 100 rubles per person into $90. They'd never seen foreign currency before. Rumor recommended that men stay indoors as to not fall victim to provoked fights, which would result in a 15-day detention and rescindment of permission to leave. So Demo stayed inside that last week.
We surrender our apartment effective April 20th. Our visas entitle us to purchase a one-way ticket for the route Kiev to Chop to Bratislava to Vienna.
The final task. They had to hand over all of their documents to Kiev City Archive, since originals were not allowed out of the country. With each passing day, it seemed less likely that things could fall apart for them. But it was not impossible.
At the city archives, the clerk discovers a discrepancy in the spelling of my first name. On my birth certificate, it is spelled Bena, but on the original copy that they have on file there, it is spelled Benna.
You are not you. A notary must provide proof that you are you.
She hands me the address for a notary office that handles amendments in emigrants' documents. I arrive there and say I need authentication that I am, well, me.
After lunch, bring a box of chocolates for the typist. I'll issue a spravka that you are you. Once proven that Bena and Benna were one and the same person, the archive issued a receipt. Then, Bena delivered all the paperwork to Revere.
We are Soviet citizens no more! We are now stateless.
At the store, a long line forms for for salami. The manager comes out. Sorry, comrades! We won't get as much salami as we'd hoped, so it will not be available to Jews. The Jews leave. An hour later, the manager says, salami will only be available to war veterans. The crowd thins. Another hour. Salami will only be available to war veterans who are members of the Communist Party. A small group remains. A short time later. Sorry, comrades, we'll get no salami today. Everybody in the crowd screams, again, the Jews have all the luck. They didn't have to wait so long.
As we get into the two cabs to take us to the train station, a few curtains stir from our apartment building. My parents, as well as a small gathering, are to see the 5 of us off at the railway station. The border station is empty, and the door to customs is locked until 10 in the evening, an hour before the train to Bratislava is scheduled to depart. Previous emigrants have equipped us with advice as precise as a recipe. Dima finds the recommended luggage handler. For 30 rubles, he will load our suitcases onto a cart the moment customs releases them, jog to the car number shown on the ticket, and persuade the engineer to dilly-dally in case my mother-in-law is not able to walk fast enough to board. Customs opens. 3 officers wait behind a metal table that stretches the length of the room. Dima loads our suitcases onto the table. An older officer strolls over.
Are you not embarrassed? Today is April 21st.
We stare in panic.
Tomorrow is Lenin's birthday. Couldn't you have waited a few days to leave?
We lower our heads. It is prudent to display guilt. In slow motion, the officer examines our documents. He then takes 2 bottles of alcohol from us purposefully above the limit and places them under the table. Dima is now pushing the suitcases with Mila and Paulina's x-rays in them towards another officer who assumes a gotcha expression when he sees the film. But Dima's body language displays trust and intimacy. Referring to our doctor's statements, he recaps the girl's medical issues.
How do I know these are not of something military? But you would know. You are an intelligent man.
Stupefied by Dima's compliment, he throws the x-rays back into the suitcase as if letting through a batch of Kalashnikovs. We are cleared. But, as it turns out, the x-rays were not even readable by the doctors in Vienna and Rome, as the quality was too poor. Our luggage handler goes beyond what 30 rubles bought. He hands the suitcases to Dima through the train window, and the train does not have to dilly-dally. Getting off the station in Bratislava, we decide to dip into our American currency to feed the girls at the train station cafe. The waitress there feeds us like royalty for only $1. The staff gathers around the table and quizzes us in Russian about the trick we utilize to get away from Big Brother. As we get up to leave, they applaud. A waiter is galloping down the platform to bring us the stuffed poodle that Paulina left behind, along with some pastries for the road.
In Austria, 2 Austrian policemen board the train for protection. In the past, Arab groups protesting immigration into Israel had attempted terrorist acts against Soviet Jews arriving in Austria.
The presence of the older officer, a big, barrel-chested man, brings home the fact that we have made it out once and for all. Danke. Danke. Danke.
It was not giddiness. It was deliverance.
Moved to tears, the older officer sits with us, rifle between his knees. He shows off pictures of his children and grandchildren and predicts a magnificent future awaiting us. He then boards the train and returns to his post at the door, beaming at us all the way to Vienna. Now we can tell Mila that she is Jewish and has every reason to be proud of that. Only 7 years old, her observations have already taught her otherwise. Only a few weeks earlier, she approved of her classmates for beating up a boy for being Jewish. We have carried her off in the nick of time.
As the train approached Vienna, Bena indulged in daydreams about fresh vegetables at the height of off-season. At least carrots and cabbage. People said there were no shortages here.
As we get off the train, 2 men from Highest greet us. They ask us what country we have chosen. Dima says, America.
Immigrants spent 2 weeks in Vienna, which consisted of reams of paperwork and Highest.
At the station, men load our luggage into a van with a driver who looks like a heavy weight boxer. We are then driven to an old 5-story building, the former bordello. A lively woman hands Dima a key to a room with a bathroom on the 4th floor. I ask him to see if any store might possibly have milk left at 1 in the afternoon. He arrives back empty-handed, but exuberant.
Let's go, you won't believe it.
We clamber down the stairs and cross the street. Dima drags me into a store. Not a store. A palace. Bright lights, colorful packages, pretty labeled jars in every configuration, fresh produce in clean bins where the customer is allowed to pick, and an entire wall dedicated to dairy.
Yes, they had milk at 1 in the afternoon.
Not one empty shelf, a few unhurried customers, and carts with wheels in it to place purchases in. Not sure if we need permission. I take one. We are gasping as we see pictures of fruit on yogurt containers. Yogurt could have fruit in it. The next day begins with a trip to the farmer's market. I am feeling dizzy as my eyes fall on crates of chicken livers, wings, breasts. A crate for each chicken part. The lines are short, and the people in them are calm. I pay the seller.
Dankeschön.
Am I hallucinating? He is giving me chicken livers, and he is thanking me?
Dankeschön.
I just stand there frozen. Dima has to pull me away. We are surrounded by a reality in which everything is happening for the first time. Later, I call my parents at the post office to tell them about the chicken hearts sold separately and the seller thanking me. My mother does not believe me.
The final layover.
2 buses chartered by Highest are taking us, 100 Soviet immigrants, to Rome.
They spent 4 months there, learning English, meeting with their caseworker, sightseeing, and waiting for their entry visas into the United States.
Dima finds us a room in a 3-room apartment in Ostia Lido, a beachfront suburb, about a half-hour train ride from Rome. Highest will pay for it until we leave for the United States. Our caseworker, Mrs. Miller, is the first American that I have ever met. She speaks Russian. In her 50s, tall, slim, tanned, with boyish hair that's meticulously styled. In spite of her old age by Soviet standards, she has the guts to wear pants, fitted tops, and necklaces made from large painted wooden beads. She does not act elderly either. Are all older American women like her? Will I be like her in 25 years? In turn, Mrs. Miller is impressed that we attempt to speak and fill out our paperwork in English.
Mrs. Miller gives Dima and Mila American names, Mike and Emily. She said Bena sounded fine, but Paulina should be changed to Paulina or Paula.
I won't spell or pronounce Babushka's name differently.
Before chucking their file into the proverbial hat to be plucked at random by an American Jewish community that would take them in, they needed to fill out paperwork, deciding which city they chose to live in.
We have no right to be choosy, but it will be easier to find a job in a larger city. Except New York, if possible. We have heard that one does not need to know English to live there, and we don't want that.
America turns 200. Bena turned 31.
Mrs. Miller tells us that the Chicago Jewish community will sponsor us. We are crushed. Chicago means gangs and slaughterhouses. But Mrs. Miller says that she thinks our information might be outdated.
I'm from Chicago. It's a great city. I personally recommend you. If you can't find a job there, you can't find one anywhere. Jewish Family Community Services, JFCS, will take good care of you. Hayes supplied a brochure in Russian and in English, entering a new culture, a handbook for Soviet migrants to the United States. The brochure was priceless.
Many things go over our heads, especially learning that in America, Judaism is a religion and not a nationality.
They also learned that
Americans react negatively to mouth and body odors, always tip 15% in restaurants, write the number 7 without the bar across the middle, do not ask money-related questions, consider a smile very important, and being left-handed is permitted.
a year later, Hayes asked Bena to update that brochure.
Hayes takes us to the airport in Rome through luggage drop-off and walks us to our Alitalia flight to New York. We spend the night in a motel near Kennedy Airport. At 5 a.m., another Hayes person shepherds us onto a bus through luggage drop-off and to the gate of our American Airlines flight to Chicago. 2 hours later, we see Chicago from above. I guess Mrs. Miller was right that it's not all gangs and slaughterhouses. When we get off the plane, a man from Hayes greets us at the gate and drives us to East Rogers Park. He points to a 4-story building and hands us the key to a 1-bedroom furnished apartment on the 2nd floor where JFCS has delivered 2 brand new mattresses as a gift. We sign for a $10 bill he produces. He then scribbles on a piece of paper.
Tomorrow, 9 a.m., JFCS, 2710 West Devon Avenue.
We find a supermarket called Jewel a block away. The doors open automatically as we approach. What a welcome! The next morning, we are standing on the corner and showing the address to JFCS to passerby to no avail. Finally, an older man motions for us to follow him. He speaks to us slowly in a mix of Yiddish and English.
Ich bin dentist. Ich arbeite in the same building. Komm mit mir.
He pays our bus fare, and we thank him in Yiddish.
When did you arrive?
Dima tells him our story, trying not to use Russian words. People in the street are wearing odd clothes. I've never seen clothes like that before, even in pictures.
There are a lot of Orthodox Jews that live here in West Rogers Park.
soll sein mit Tomaz.
An eerie sense of deja vu floods over me. In the distance, I see a man with a long beard, dressed in all black, wearing a hat that I recognize from Babushka's descriptions as the type of hat her father Velvel, my great-grandfather, wore. A shtreimel. I am home. On May 5th, 1977, my parents, Avram and Raquel, landed in Chicago. When they got off the plane, a camera-clicking and microphone-thrusting group surrounded them. My parents were the 1,000th Soviet immigrants to Chicago. We Soviet Jews were an enigma to American Jews. They thought that we had risked everything for the freedom to maintain Jewish traditions. But when we gained those freedoms, it turns out we didn't even really know that we had traditions. Once, I sent Emily and Paulina to their Orthodox Jewish day school with their lunch packed. Pork chops. I couldn't understand why the principal was outraged. I even asked, how do you spell kosher? So, American Jews saw an unknown species in us. Their cousins from behind the Iron Curtain. Decades of life on a different planet can do that to a family. But only for a time. Then you're one family again. How many bushels are my children worth? How many bushels are my 5 grandchildren worth? How many bushels am I worth?